The alarm echoed through the galactic communication hub on Zephyr Prime. Commander Thrix's 4 widened as the massive display showed readings unlike anything seen in decades. A signal was broadcasting across every known frequency, reaching every corner of civilized space with impossible strength. "What is that?" Thrix asked, his translator converting the clicks and whistles of his native language into standard galactic. "Unknown origin, sir," replied his aide. "The signal appears to be coming from the Outer Rim territories." Grid reference: "Oh my, it's from the Dead Zone." The Dead Zone. Even saying those words made most species nervous. It was a region of space where ancient ruins drifted between dead stars. Most civilizations avoided it completely. Strange things happened there. Ships disappeared. Those few explorers who returned spoke of whispers in their minds and technology that defied explanation. The signal crackled to life on the main speakers. An ancient voice spoke in a language that somehow every species could understand, as if it spoke directly to their minds. "Children of the galaxy, hear our words. We are the last of the architects, builders of the first roads between stars. A great darkness comes from beyond your borders. It has consumed galaxies before yours, and will consume galaxies after, unless someone stands against it. We call for aid. We call for warriors. We call for those who know struggle and refuse to yield. Time grows short. The Devourers come," the message repeated 3 times, then fell silent. Within hours, every major civilization in the galaxy had received and analyzed the transmission. The response was swift and unanimous: ignore it. On Zephyr Prime, the Council of Minds met in their crystal chambers. The Zephyrans prided themselves on logic and technological advancement. Their cities floated among the clouds of their gas-giant home-world. Marvels of engineering that had taken millennia to perfect, clearly a hoax, declared High Counselor Vex. The architects are myth. Children's stories. This signal is likely some kind of weapon designed to lure ships into the Dead Zone. But sir, a younger counselor dared to speak. The signal's power requirements would be enormous. Only a civilization far beyond our level could broadcast with such strength. Exactly why we should ignore it, Vex replied coldly. If someone has that level of technology, they certainly don't need our help. This is obviously a trap, the other counselors agreed. The Zephyrians would send no ships to investigate. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. In T-Wharton space, of the Corbin Empire, General Brute slammed his massive fist on the strategy table. The Corvs were a proud warrior race, standing 3 meters tall with armor-like skin and natural weapons that could tear through steel. Architects, devourers, ancient myths, he roared. We have real wars to fight here and now. Our enemies press our borders while we speak. I will not waste ships chasing ghost stories in the Dead Zone. His officers nodded agreement. The Corvain fleets would remain focused on their territorial disputes. Even the wise ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form eons ago, chose not to respond. They communicated through thought alone, their consciousness flowing like light between crystal formations on their sacred worlds. This call speaks of violence and war. Their speaker whispered into the minds of the collective. We have moved beyond such crude concepts. If this threat is real, it will be faced by those still bound to material concerns. We shall continue our meditations on higher truths, and so it. When, from the trade-focused merchant guilds to the isolationist deep thinkers, every major power found reasons to ignore the call. Some thought it was a hoax. Others believed it was not their problem. Many simply feared what they might find in the Dead Zone. But the signal had reached farther than just the major civilizations. On a small blue planet in an unremarkable star system, Dr. Sarah Chun sat in the cramped control room of Earth's newest deep space monitoring station. Unlike the gleaming facilities of the galactic powers, this station was built from recycled materials and held together with determination and clever engineering. Did you get that, Sarah? Called Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison from across the room. That was definitely not random space noise. Sarah replayed the signal, her fingers dancing across keyboards that would have seemed primitive to most galactic species. But humans had learned to make the best of what they had. Earth was still new to the galactic community, having made first contact only 20 years earlier. Most other species considered them a curiosity at best. It's incredible, Sarah whispered, studying the translation algorithms she had developed. Tis lenguaje. It's not just communication. It's almost like it's designed to speak directly to the mind and listen to what it's saying. She played back the part about warriors from Worlds of Struggle. Jake leaned over her shoulder, reading the display. Deathworlders, he said quietly. That was what the galactic databases called Earth and its people. Most planets that developed life were gentle places with stable climates and few natural disasters. Earth was different. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, mass extinctions. Humanity had evolved on a world that tried to kill them at every turn. Most galactic species found the very idea of Earth terrifying. Think they mean us? Jake asked. Look at this part. Sarah pointed to her analysis. The signal mentions beings from a world of eternal struggle. The Galactic Archive lists exactly one inhabited planet, matching that description in this region of space. They looked at each other, understanding passing between them. Every other species in the galaxy was ignoring this call for help. But humans had never been good at walking away from people in trouble. We need to tell Command, Jake said. Within 6 hours, the message was racing through Earth's communication networks. Unlike the immediate dismissal it had received elsewhere, it sparked fierce debate in the halls of the United Earth government. Absolutely not, declared Secretary Williams during the emergency session. We're barely established in galactic society. We can't go charging off to some dead zone chasing ancient myths. But Admiral Helena Santos stood firm. That signal came from someone in serious trouble. Maybe it's a hoax, maybe it's not. But if we don't respond and something terrible happens, how will we live with ourselves? We're talking about the dead zone, Williams argued. Ships don't come back from there. Human ships have never tried, Santos replied. Look, we all know what the other species think of us. Primitive Deathworlders, too violent, too reckless, too stubborn to know when to quit. Maybe that's exactly what this situation needs. The debate raged for hours, but in the end, humanity did what it had always done when faced with the unknown. They chose to move forward rather than step back. 3 days later, a small fleet began assembling at the edge of Earth's solar system. It wasn't much, by galactic standards, a handful of converted research vessels and old military ships that had been retired from Earth's defense forces, but it was crewed by volunteers, men and women who had heard the call and decided to answer. Captain Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching his small fleet take formation. Behind them, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the black of space. Ahead lay the unknown dangers of the dead zone. All ships report ready, Captain, his communications officer announced. Rodriguez nodded. Somewhere out there, someone was waiting for help that wasn't coming. Everyone else had said no, but humans had never been everyone else. Take us out, he ordered. Time to see what's waiting for us in the dark. The fleet turned away from Earth and began its journey toward the dead zone, carrying humanity's answer to the galaxy's silence. Captain Marcus Rodriguez had commanded ships through asteroid fields and solar storms, but nothing had prepared him for the dead zone. 3 weeks out from Earth, his small fleet encountered their first real test. Captain, we've got a problem. Chief Engineer Lisa Park called from her station. Gravitational readings are all wrong here. That asteroid field ahead isn't behaving like it should. Rodriguez studied the display. What should have been a simple field of drifting rocks was moving in impossible patterns. Asteroids the size of mountains spun around each other in complex dances, their paths defying every law of physics he knew. How do we get through? He asked. We don't? Park replied. Any sane crew would turn around and find another route. This could tear our ships apart. Good thing we're not sane. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Options. Lieutenant Sarah Chun, who had joined the mission as their xenolinguist and communications expert, looked up from her analysis. The patterns aren't random. There's a rhythm to it, almost like music. Music. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. I've been tracking the movements for 6 hours. The asteroids are following some kind of mathematical sequence. If we can match our approach to their rhythm, you want us to dance with flying mountains. It's either that or add 3 months to our journey going around, Jun replied. Rodriguez considered this. Back home, the galactic news networks were already mocking Earth's foolish mission to nowhere. The Zephyrians had posted calculations showing it would take a human fleet twice as long as anyone else to reach the dead zone, assuming they survived it all. Do it, he decided. Match their rhythm. What followed was the most terrifying flying of Rodriguez's career. The Defiance and her sister ships wove between asteroids the size of cities, following patterns that changed every few minutes. Mortan 11 massive rocks passed so close that their gravitational fields triggered hull stress warnings. Botted worked. The human fleet danced with the cosmic ballet, their pilots adapting to each new movement. Where a more advanced species might have tried to force their way through with superior technology, the humans simply learned the rhythm and joined it. Never seen anything like it, Park muttered as they emerged from the field. Those rocks were moving like they were alive. Maybe they are, Chun said quietly, studying her readings. Life takes strange forms out here. Their next challenge came a week later. The fleet's radiation detectors started screaming as they approached what looked like empty space. Massive energy storm ahead, reported scanner technician David Kim. Radiation levels would cook us in minutes. Rodriguez pulled up the display. The storm was invisible to normal sensors, but their enhanced equipment showed a churning mass of deadly energy stretching across their path. Can we go around? Would add months to the journey, Kim replied. And, sir, there's something moving in there. Moving how? Kim's face went pale. Living things, big ones. The scanner showed creatures the size of Earth's whales, swimming through deadly radiation as if it were water. Their bodies glowed with the same energy that would kill any known form of life. Recommendations, Rodriguez asked his crew. Run, Park said immediately. Those things eat radiation for breakfast. Our ships would be like candy to them. But Chun was studying the creatures' movement patterns. Wait, look at how they're moving. They're not attacking each other. They're traveling together like a migration. So maybe they're not hostile. Maybe they're just trying to get somewhere same as us. Rodriguez watched the massive creatures flowing through the energy storm. Every instinct told him to find another route, but human instincts had been wrong before about what was dangerous and what wasn't. Take us in slowly, he ordered. Minimal power. Let's see if we can follow their lead. The human ships crept into the storm, riding in the wake of the great creatures. The radiation that should have killed them was somehow held back by the aliens' presence. The creatures seemed curious about the small ships, but not threatened. They're protecting us, Chun breathed in wonder. They know we can't survive the radiation. One of the great beings, larger than all the others, actually nudged the Defiance gently with something that might have been a fin or tentacle. Its touch sent harmonious vibrations through the ship's hull. It's trying to communicate, Chen realized. She quickly set up a response pattern, using the ship's engines to create similar vibrations. The creature responded with what could only be described as joy. Soon, the entire herd was singing to the human ships, their voices carrying through space in ways that should have been impossible. When the fleet emerged from the storm, they carried with them recordings of the first known attempt at communication between humans and energy-based life forms. But more importantly, they had learned something about themselves. Where other species saw only danger, humans could find allies. The pattern continued throughout their journey. Each obstacle that should have destroyed them became a puzzle to solve. Space pirates that attacked their fleet found themselves outmaneuvered by tactics no civilized species would attempt. Human fighters used their ships' life support systems as weapons, venting atmosphere to create debris fields, then hiding in their own exhaust clouds. They fight like they're insane, one pirate captain was heard saying on intercepted communications, who uses their own ship as a battering ram. Deathworlders, came the reply. I heard about these humans. They evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every day. This is how they think. Word of the human fleet progress began to spread through the galactic underground networks. Where most species saw reckless stupidity, a few began to see something else. Adaptability beyond anything the galaxy had ever known. The breakthrough came 2 months into their journey. Long-range sensors detected something massive ahead. A structure so enormous it dwarfed entire star systems. Dear God, whispered Kim, staring at his displays. It's the size of a planet. No bigger. Much bigger. The nexus hung in space like a jewel made of impossibly complex geometry. Its surface crawled with patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than human eyes could process. "That's it!" Chun said, her voice filled with awe. That's where the signal came from. But as they approached, it became clear the Nexus was not abandoned. Docking bays larger than Earth's cities opened to receive them. Lights that had been dark for millions of years began to flicker on. "We're being scanned," Kim reported. "Energy patterns unlike anything in our databases." "Hostile?" Rodriguez asked. "I don't think so. It feels more like recognition, like it's been waiting for us." The human fleet docked with the ancient structure, their small ships dwarfed by the immensity around them. As the airlock cycled, Rodriguez felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. "Whatever's in there has been waiting for millions of years," he told his crew. "Let's not keep them waiting any longer." The doors opened, revealing corridors that stretched into darkness. But the darkness was not empty. Something was moving in the depths of the Nexus. Something that had slept for eons and was finally waking up. Behind them, their journey through the dead zone had been monitored by hidden sensors. The galactic powers had expected the human fleet to disappear like all the others. Instead, they had done the impossible. They had not only survived the dead zone, they had befriended it. And now, deep in the heart of the Nexus, ancient minds were stirring. The architects were awakening, and they had much to tell their unexpected visitors about the darkness that was coming. The chamber was vast beyond human comprehension. Captain Rodriguez and his team walked through corridors that could have held Earth's largest cities, their footsteps echoing in the silence of ages. The walls around them pulsed with faint energy, responding to their presence after millions of years of darkness. "The air is breathable," reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, the mission's chief scientist. "Not just breathable, it's perfect. Oxygen levels, pressure, temperature. It's like this place was built for us." "That's impossible," Chief Engineer Park muttered, scanning the walls with her instruments. "This structure predates human evolution by millions of years." Sarah Chun studied her translation devices. Symbols appeared on the walls around them. "Not built for humans specifically," she said slowly. "Built for any species that could make it this far. The Nexus is adapting to us." They reached the center of the structure where a great sphere of crystal hung suspended in the middle of an enormous chamber. Inside the sphere, shadows moved. Ancient forms that had waited in stasis since before Earth's sun was born. "They're waking up," Chun whispered. The crystal began to crack. Light poured out, not harsh, but warm, like sunlight through leaves. And from that light they came. The architects were not what anyone expected. Tasted tresim tall, but seemed fragile, almost ghostly. Their skin was translucent, showing the flow of energy beneath. They had no fixed form, constantly shifting between states of matter and energy. The first architect to fully emerge looked at the humans with eyes that held the weight of galaxies. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds. "We are Zaratha, last speaker of the architects. We have waited so long for someone to answer our call. So many species heard our message. So many turned away." Rodriguez stepped forward, fighting the urge to kneel before this ancient being. "We're here now. Tell us what you need." Zaraito's form flickered with what might have been surprise. "Direct, blunt no, ceremony, or ritual. Yes, you are indeed from the world of eternal struggle. We have watched your kind through the cosmic barriers. We know what you have endured." The chamber around them came alive. Holographic displays showed the history of the galaxy. Civilizations rising and falling. Wars that spanned millennia. But then the images shifted to show something from beyond. "Behold the Devourers," Zarathal said. The humans stared in horror at the display. Ships the size of moons drifted through space, but they were not built. They were grown. Living vessels with surfaces that writhed and pulsed. Where they passed, stars went dark. Planets became empty husks. "They have consumed 3 galaxies before yours," Zarethel continued. "Each time they learn, each time they grow stronger. They do not merely destroy. They consume everything. Matter, energy, even the fundamental forces that hold reality together." Dr. Vasquez studied the images with scientific fascination and growing dread. "How many of them are there?" "Countless. They reproduce by consumption. Every world they devour creates more of their kind. They are a cancer that spreads between galaxies, and they have turned their attention to yours. Rodriguez felt ice in his veins. How long do we have? They're already here? Zarethal replied. Their advanced scouts entered your galaxy 2 cycles ago. They have been studying, learning, preparing. The main force will arrive within 1 of your years. The team exchanged glances. 1 year to prepare for something that had destroyed entire galaxies. What can we do? Chun asked. If they've consumed whole galaxies, how can anyone stop them? Zarathal's form brightened. That is why we called for warriors from the world of struggle. Every species we have encountered thinks in the same patterns. They try to outfight the Devourers with superior technology. They try to outlast them with better defenses. They try to outnumber them with larger fleets. All fail because they think like prey. And we think like what? Rodriguez asked. Predators. Your species evolved on a world where everything tried to kill you. You learned to hunt the hunters. You learned to turn disadvantages into advantages. You learned to survive the impossible. Another architect emerged from the crystal. This one carrying something that looked like a weapon but felt like a living thing. I am Mork, keeper of the arsenal. We have weapons beyond your imagination. Technologies that reshape reality itself. But they require something your species has that others lack, which is the willingness to embrace chaos. To fight without certainty of victory. To risk everything on a plan that seems insane. Mork showed them through chambers filled with impossible devices. Weapons that could tear holes in space. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Armor that protected by making the wearer temporarily invisible to reality itself. These require minds that can think in paradoxes. Moore explained. Your quantum physicists would understand. Most species need certainty to function. Your kind thrives in uncertainty. But it was the final revelation that changed everything. The Devourers are not evil, Zarathal said as they gathered in the central chamber. They do not hate or seek to cause suffering. They simply exist to consume. It is their nature, as breathing is yours. That doesn't make them less dangerous, Rodriguez pointed out. No, but it makes them predictable. They adapt to resist whatever opposes them. But your species does not oppose in the ways they understand. You adapt faster than they can respond to. Chun was studying her notes from their journey through the dead zone. The energy creatures in the radiation storm. They didn't attack us because we didn't attack them. We joined their migration instead of fighting it. Exactly. The Devourers expect resistance. They plan for it, but they do not plan for alliance. They do not plan for surrender that becomes victory. They do not plan for species that dance with asteroids instead of blasting through them. Park looked up from the architect technology she was examining. You're saying we can beat them by being ourselves. We are saying you are the first species we have encountered. That might surprise them. And the Devourers fear only one thing. The unknown. Rodriguez felt the weight of worlds settling on his shoulders. What do you need from us? Time, Zarethal replied. Time to awaken our systems fully. Time to prepare the weapons and warriors to carry them. Not just your fleet, but others. You must convince your galaxy to unite. The other species won't listen to us. They think we're primitive death. Then you must show them what Deathworlders can do. As if summoned by their words, alarms began sounding throughout the Nexus. On the displays, space around them lit up with energy signatures. What is it? Rodriguez demanded. Morek's form darkened with alarm. Devourer scouts. They have found us. 3 ships materialized near the Nexus. They were smaller than the massive vessels from the historical displays, but they pulsed with malevolent life. Their hulls shifted and writhed, and energy weapons that looked like biological organs tracked toward the human fleet. They will test us. Sadatul sighed. They will learn our capabilities. Then they will report back to the main force. Rodriguez was already moving toward the docking bay. Not if we have anything to say about it. Captain, those ships are beyond anything in our databases. Park warned. Our weapons might not even scratch them. Then we don't use weapons, Rodriguez replied. We use what we're good at. As the human crew raced to their ships, Zarathal called after them. Remember, Captain, they expect you to fight like prey. Show them how predators hunt. The Devourer scouts had come to observe and learn. They were about to get their first lesson in human warfare. Sometimes the best way to win a fight is to refuse to fight the way your enemy expects. The real test was about to begin. The Devourer scouts hung in space like malevolent tumors, their living hulls pulsing with energy that made human sensors scream. Captain Rodriguez watched them from the bridge of the Defiance, his mind racing through possibilities. "They're scanning us." Scanner technician Kim reported, "Energy patterns unlike anything we've seen. It's like they're learning our technology just by looking at it." "Then let's not give them time to learn," Rodriguez decided. "All ships, prepare for engagement." "But remember, we're not fighting their fight." Chief Engineer Park's voice crackled over the communications. "Captain, the architect weapon systems are online, but they're not responding to our control inputs. It's like they're waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" "I don't know. But sir, I don't think they work the way normal weapons do." Rodriguez studied the tactical display. 3 Devourer scouts against 4 human ships. By every measure of firepower and technology, it should have been no contest. The humans should have been vaporized in seconds. "Sarah, any word from the architects?" Chun's voice was tight with concentration. "They're not responding to direct communication, but the Nexus itself is sending us something. Data streams, patterns. It's like it's teaching us something." "Teaching us what?" "How to think, like the weapons." Before Rodriguez could ask what she meant, the Devourers attacked. But their assault was unlike anything in human military doctrine. Instead of firing energy beams or launching missiles, they simply moved toward the human ships. As they approached, reality around them began to bend. Space twisted. Time flowed differently. Hull stress increasing. Park reported, "They're not shooting at us. They're pulling us apart with gravitational fields." Evasive maneuvers. The human ships scattered, but the Devourers followed with impossible grace. They moved like living things, predicting each evasive action before it happened. Their hulls rippled and changed, adapting to each human tactic in real time. "They're learning," Kim said in horror. "Every move we make, they counter it faster." Rodriguez watched his tactical display as the Devourers herded his ships like wolves with sheep. This was how they operated, not through brute force, but through adaptation. They learned their prey's capabilities, then overwhelmed them with superior versions of their own tactics. "Chun, what did the Nexus teach you?" "It's not about fighting them directly," she replied, her voice strange. "The architect weapons, they don't work like ours. They respond to intention, not targeting systems." "What kind of intention?" "The willingness to become something else." One of the human ships, the Endeavor, was caught in a Devourer's gravitational field. Rodriguez watched in horror as the enemy began to tear it apart, piece by piece, studying each component as it was destroyed. "That's it," he said suddenly. "All ships rammed the scouts." "Sir." Park's voice was incredulous. "You heard me. Full-speed ramming attack. Don't try to outfight them. Become the weapons." It was insane. It was suicide. It was exactly what no sane species would ever attempt. It was perfectly human. The remaining 3 human ships turned toward the Devourers and accelerated to maximum speed. The alien scouts seemed confused by this tactic. They had learned to counter weapons, fire evasive maneuvers and energy shields, but they had never encountered an enemy that used their own ships as projectiles. The first impact came when the research vessel Newton struck the smallest Devourer scout. Instead of the explosion everyone expected, something else happened. The moment of contact triggered the architect weapons, and suddenly the human ship was no longer entirely human. Energy from the Nexus flowed through the Newton, transforming it into something that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions. The Devourers couldn't follow. The scout tried to adapt, but it couldn't learn to counter something that wasn't entirely there. The weapon worked. Chun breathed, but not the way we expected. It didn't destroy the scout. It made us into something it couldn't understand. Rodriguez watched as the Newton phased in and out of reality, its crew somehow still alive inside a ship that had become more concept than matter. All ships follow the Newton's lead, become the impossible. The Defiance and the remaining ship, the Horizon, struck the other 2 scouts simultaneously. The collision should have killed everyone involved. Instead, the architect technology activated, transforming the battle into something that had never existed before. Human ships that were also energy beings. Weapons that fired concepts instead of particles. A battle that took place in normal space, hyperspace, and dimensions that had no names. The Devourers tried to adapt, but they couldn't adapt to something that changed its own nature faster than they could understand it. Their strength, learning, and countering enemy tactics became useless against enemies who redefined what tactics meant. They're retreating, Kim reported in amazement. One of the scouts was trying to disengage, but the transformed Newton pursued it relentlessly. The human crew had learned to think in the same fluid way as their ship, becoming part of the weapon rather than merely using it. "Let one go," Rodriguez ordered. "We wanted to report back, sir." The architects were right. The Devourers feared the unknown. Let them know that something new has entered their galaxy. The surviving scout fled toward the galactic rim, carrying with it data that would confuse and disturb the main Devourer force. They had encountered something unprecedented, prey that had become predator by refusing to remain either, but the cost was severe. When the battle ended and the ships began to return to normal space, they discovered that the transformation had changed more than just their vessels. Captain Dr. Vasquez's voice was different, somehow deeper. "We're not entirely human anymore." Rodriguez looked at his hands and saw energy flowing beneath his skin. The architect weapons hadn't just transformed their ships, they had transformed the crews as well. They were still human, but they were also something more. "Are we losing ourselves?" June asked. "No," came Zarathal's voice from the Nexus. "You are becoming what we hoped you would. The weapons do not change you. They reveal what you always were. Beings who adapt, who transform, who refuse to be limited by what others think is possible." The news of the battle spread quickly through galactic communication networks. For the first time, someone had not just survived an encounter with the Devourers, they had driven them away. But the reports made no sense to the major galactic powers. "How do you fight something by becoming it?" demanded Commander Thrick on Zephyr Prime. "How do you use weapons that don't exist in normal space?" asked General Brute of the Corvin Empire. But among the smaller species, the outcasts and the desperate, word spread differently. The humans had done the impossible. The Deathworlders had shown that adaptation could triumph over superior technology. And in the depths of space, moving between galaxies, the main Devourer force received the Scouts' report. For the first time in their existence across multiple galaxies, they encountered data they could not fully understand. Something in this galaxy was different. Something that adapted faster than they could learn. Something that transformed disadvantage into advantage through means they had never encountered. The Devourers began to change their plans. This galaxy would require a different approach. They would send not just scouts, but a full assault force. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin in earnest. Back at the Nexus, Rodriguez looked at his transformed crew and felt both pride and uncertainty. They had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. And they were no longer entirely the species that had left Earth weeks ago. They were becoming something new, something the galaxy had never seen, something that might just be able to save everyone. The alarm that woke Captain Rodriguez was unlike any he had heard before. Not the sharp cry of immediate danger, but a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from the fabric of space itself. He was on Earth in the command center that had been hastily constructed in the Australian outback, surrounded by technology that was part human engineering and part architect miracle. "They're here," announced Dr. Chun, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before their transformation. "Long-range sensors are picking up the main Devourer force. Thousands of ships, Captain. Maybe tens of thousands." Rodriguez looked at the display, showing Earth's solar system. It looked so peaceful, so normal. Mars colonies went about their daily business. The asteroid mining stations continued their work. Children played in the orbital habitats, unaware that an I-force capable of consuming galaxies was approaching their home. "How long?" he asked. 6 hours until they reached the outer system perimeter," replied Lieutenant Kim, his scanner abilities enhanced by his partial transformation. "They're not rushing. They're being careful this time." Rodriguez nodded grimly. The Scouts' report had changed Devourer tactics. Instead of the usual overwhelming assault, they were approaching slowly, testing every defensive measure, adapting to each trap before springing it. Status report on the fleet. All human vessels are in position, reported Chief Engineer Park. But sir, we're not exactly human anymore, are we? It was true. In the months since the battle at the Nexus, the transformation had continued. The crews who had bonded with architect technology found themselves changing in ways both wonderful and terrifying. They could sense intentions across space. They could think in dimensions that had no names. They could become weapons, shields, or tools as needed. But they were still recognizably themselves. Still stubborn, still refusing to give up, when the odds were impossible. The Galactic Powers, Rodriguez asked. Still debating in the Galactic Council, Chun replied with a bitter laugh. The Zapparans want to evacuate to the next galaxy. The Corvans are planning a traditional defensive strategy that would be slaughtered in minutes. The Ethereals are meditating on whether this is all an illusion. And are people ready, sir? Every human colony, every ship, every station. We've had months to prepare. Rodriguez looked out at the stars and smiled. Humanity had spent those months doing what they did best, taking an impossible situation and finding a way to make it work for them. The solar system had been transformed into the largest trap in galactic history. But not the kind of trap other species would build. This was a human trap, which meant it was based on principles that made no sense to anyone else. Sir, Kim announced, Devourer fleet is crossing the helipaus. They're there, slowing down. They're confused by our defenses. Of course they were. Human defensive strategy had never made sense to anyone, including humans. Instead of massive battle stations or energy shields, Earth's system was defended by things that looked like space junk, merchant vessels, and scientific equipment. Phase 1. Rodriguez ordered. Across the system, thousands of seemingly innocent objects activated. Research probes became quantum mines. Cargo containers opened to reveal gravity wells. Weather satellites began broadcasting signals that turned space itself into a maze of twisted dimensions. The Devourers tried to adapt, but every time they learned to counter one defensive measure, it transformed into something else. Weapons became sensors. Shields became weapons. The entire defensive grid was alive, changing constantly, never the same thing twice. They're getting frustrated, Chun observed. I can sense their confusion through the quantum links. They've never encountered a defense that adapts faster than they do. But Rodriguez knew this was just the beginning. The real battle would come when the Devourers realized they couldn't simply overwhelm Earth's defenses and decided to commit their full force. Sir, massive energy spike from the Devourer command ship, Kim reported. They're charging some kind of superweapon. Let them, Rodriguez replied calmly. Phase 2. The Devourer superweapon fired. A beam of energy that could have cracked planets. It struck Earth's moon and disappeared. Where did it go? Kim asked in amazement. Nowhere, Chun replied. The moon isn't entirely real anymore. We've been slowly phasing it out of normal space for months. Their weapon hit something that was only partially there. The Devourers fired again, this time at Earth itself. The beam struck the planet and vanished again, absorbed by atmospheric processors that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Rodriguez could sense the alien fleet's growing panic. They were facing something that violated every law of warfare they understood. How do you destroy an enemy that keeps changing the rules of what destruction means? Sir, they're retreating to the outer system and regrouping, Kim reported. All ships, the entire force. Phase 3. Rodriguez announced. This was the part he had hoped they wouldn't need. Phase 3 meant revealing the full extent of what humanity had become. Across the solar system, human crews began the final transformation. Ships that had been partially converted by architect technology completed their metamorphosis. People who had been enhanced by their contact with ancient weapons became living extensions of those weapons. The human fleet didn't attack the Devourers. Instead, they surrounded them. Surrender, Rodriguez broadcast on all frequencies. You have encountered something you cannot adapt to. You can join us, or you can leave this galaxy, but you cannot consume it. The response was immediate and violent. Thousands of Devourer ships opened fire simultaneously, pouring enough energy into space to sterilize solar systems. The human fleet absorbed it all. Impossible, came a voice from the Devourer command ship, speaking in harmonics that bypassed language entirely. We adapt. We overcome. We consume. It is our nature. And it is our nature to adapt faster. Rodriguez replied, "You learn to eat galaxies. We learn to digest the indigestible. You learn to absorb energy. We learn to become energy. You learn to think like prey. We learn to think like everything at once." The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't fought with weapons or tactics. It was fought with concepts, with ideas about what was possible. The Devourers tried to consume the human fleet and found themselves being consumed in return. They tried to adapt to human strategies and discovered that humans had no fixed strategies. They tried to overwhelm with numbers and found that humans treated numbers as suggestions rather than facts. In the end, it wasn't violence that defeated them. It was something the Devourers had never encountered in all their millennia of consumption: the offer of symbiosis. Join us. Rodriguez broadcast. Become something new. You don't have to consume to survive. You can create instead. Some of the Devourers accepted. Others fled back to intergalactic space, carrying with them the knowledge that this galaxy was protected by something beyond their understanding. When the battle ended, the solar system was quiet, except for the sound of transformation. Devourer ships that had chosen to stay were already changing, their living hulls adapting to human concepts of cooperation rather than consumption. Status report, Rodriguez requested. "The galaxy is safe," Chun replied. "Word is spreading through all communication networks. The threat is over." And Aspar looked at her hands, which flickered between flesh and energy. "We're not human anymore, not entirely. But we're not architects either. We're something new." Rodriguez nodded. They had become what the galaxy needed. Guardians, who could adapt to any threat. Protectors who thought outside every known limitation. Over the following months, human fleets began spreading throughout the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as teachers, showing other species that adaptation was possible, that cooperation could triumph over consumption, that the impossible was just another word for not yet tried. The galactic powers eventually accepted what they couldn't understand, that the primitive Deathworlders from an unremarkable planet had saved them all. And in the depths of space, moving toward distant galaxies, new human ships carried both architect technology and human determination to civilizations that might face similar threats. The galaxy had learned that sometimes salvation came not from the most advanced or peaceful species, but from those who refused to surrender when faced with the impossible. Earth's children had become something unprecedented, a species that could transform not just themselves, but the very nature of what was possible. They were no longer bound by the limitations that defined other forms of life. They had become the galaxy's new guardians, protectors who adapted to meet any challenge. No matter how impossible it seemed, the age of the Devourers was over. The age of the adapters had begun.